My name is Joshua North, and my audience will understand the health risks associated with utilizing playground facilities that are overly exposed to the sun. 189 degrees, that's 24 degrees hotter than the USDA's recommended temperature for cooking chicken. Unfortunately, this is the temperature that playground equipment can reach during the summer. A 2016 study by the Consumer Product Safety Commission, or CPSC, says that up to 500 emergency room visits a year can be attributed to heat and sun-related injuries at playgrounds. I'm going to discuss a couple of the more common types of heat and sun-related playground injuries, as well as potential mitigations. Of the various types of heat and sun-related injuries, contact burns are some of the most common, and this makes sense considering how hot this playground equipment can get. The CPSC reported that on a 74-degree day, a child sustained second-degree burns by coming in contact with the black rubber mat at the bottom of the playground. Between the hours of 10 a.m. and 2 p.m., the sun's at its most intense, and 67% of playgrounds have no shade during these hours. And according to the National Program for Playground Safety, or NPPS, that's when children are out there playing more often, especially during the summertime when they're not in school. This means that, especially in warmer climates, we're encouraging our children to go out and play on these structures that are potentially hazardous. Here we have some information from the Texas Tech University, and it's a burn threshold. At 140 degrees, it takes a minute of sustained contact to get a burn. But at 170 degrees, it takes as little as 3 seconds. How much faster can a child sustain a burn when they're touching a surface that's 189 degrees? This is particularly problematic for younger children, 3 years old and younger. They lack the recoil response from these hot surfaces that would be associated with a stove. Stoves are instantly hot, instantly painful, and they'll pull back. But these slow burns, they don't know how to react to them properly or fast enough, so they maintain contact with these surfaces longer than older children or adults. They also have more delicate skin, which makes them more prone to receiving these injuries than their older counterparts. Here we have injuries from a 19-month-old girl that came in contact with a hot metal ramp at a playground. She also sustained injuries to her other hand, her knees, and her abdomen. She spent 4 days in the hospital recovering from those injuries. And while burns are very visual, there's more subtle injuries that are associated with the heat, namely heat cramps, heat exhaustion, and heat stroke. And we have similar issues here as we did with contact burns. Children aren't very good at self-regulation, particularly in the areas of taking breaks and proper hydration. Kids are going to go and run and play until they're told to stop or until they get hurt or sick. And unfortunately, that's what's happening at playgrounds across the country. They're not taking breaks, they're not drinking water, and that's making them more susceptible to these heat injuries. And while contact burns and heat injuries are very serious issues, there's a simple solution: providing shade. Trees, shade sails, and shade structures are potential sources of shade during these peak hours that we can institute to reduce the risk of injury. The CPSC suggests that proper implementation of shade can reduce these injuries by up to 90%. This, coupled with proper hydration, can essentially eliminate these injuries altogether. And all of this is cheaper than doing nothing. The New York Times reported that New York City alone, between the years of 2005 and 2014, paid over $200 million to families of children who sustained burns or heat injuries at playgrounds. This leads us to a clear conclusion that simply implementing shade can reduce these injuries and make our playgrounds safer. Looking at everything we've discussed, this supports our conclusion that while playgrounds are a free, fun way to have some recreation for our children, they pose inherent risks, especially when they're overly exposed to the sun. But those risks can be mitigated by the implementation of shade and proper hydration. At this point, it's up to people, individuals, and cities to decide whether or not they want to address this issue. Unfortunately, most people don't understand the significance of the threat that these playground equipment and unshaded areas pose to children. And they're potentially making significant choices for these children and encouraging these children to play in an area that can cause serious and potentially permanent harm.